They say no food lasts forever, but 5 centuries ago, villagers across Europe and the Pacific believed one plant did. A plant you could plant once and harvest for decades. A plant so reliable that explorers carried it across oceans and healers praised it as the guardian against hunger. Then history erased it. Not because it failed, but because powerful kingdoms wanted crops they could measure, tax, and control. Today, almost no one remembers it, even though it still grows quietly in backyard gardens, waiting to be rediscovered. This is the forgotten story of an ancient survival plant, a plant that may hold the key to feeding the future. Unlike modern vegetables that collapse after a single season, this ancient crop did something unbelievable. It returned every year, stronger, bigger, producing even more food than before. Plant it once, walk away, and it would keep feeding you for life. No fertilizers, no pesticides, no irrigation systems, just pure survival biology. This was not a vegetable, it was insurance, a safety net, a guarantee that even when everything else failed, something on the land would still grow. For thousands of years, farmers across the Pacific relied on it to endure storms, droughts, volcanic winters, and famines. Archaeologists from the University of Auckland call it one of the most important survival foods in human migration history. But if this crop was so powerful, so reliable, so essential to ancient civilizations, why did America ignore it? Why was it erased from modern farming almost completely? To understand its power, we go back before medieval Europe, back to an age of canoe-sailing navigators crossing the Pacific, back to Polynesian cultures who carried this plant across 8,000 miles of ocean. Cold summers destroyed fields. Volcanic eruptions blackened the sky. Droughts devastated crops. Civilizations rose and collapsed around climate disasters, but not the communities who grew this plant. Why? Because this crop, taro, comes from a perennial ancestor so tough that botanists at the USDA describe it as one of the most resilient root crops ever domesticated. Its natural biology allowed it to survive. Flooding, drought, heavy clay soil, poor sunlight, human neglect, even total abandonment. Its roots dig deep, up to 3 feet, pulling minerals from places no grain or modern vegetable can reach. Taro didn't just survive hardship, it thrived in it. That's why ancient Polynesians called it the plant that sustains life, and why early Asian farmers planted it near homes as their forever food. So the question becomes, if this crop built civilizations, why did modern agriculture pretend it never existed? When Europeans reached the New World, they brought wheat, barley, peas, and a handful of vegetables, but not the ancient survival plants that powered Asia and the Pacific. Why? Because by the 1500s, European farming had shifted toward annual crops: wheat, rye, potatoes, foods that rulers could tax, count, control, and profit from. But perennial survival crops like taro, they were a problem for kings and landlords. You plant it once, and you no longer depend on anyone. No seed stores, no plow teams, no seasonal taxes, no dependence on feudal land systems. It created independence, power, freedom from the hierarchy. So these plants slowly disappeared from Europe. Not because they failed, but because they couldn't be controlled. By the time America was founded, taro was a stranger, a ghost, a crop that had fed humanity for 10,000 years, completely erased from modern memory. So what is this forgotten survivor? It goes by many ancient names: the canoe plant, the plant of origin, the root of life, the staff of survival. But today, we know it simply as taro, Colocasia esculenta. Not the bright purple ice cream flavor, not the powder in bubble tea, the real plant, the ancient one, the crop that fed the Pacific for thousands of years. This isn't like potatoes or spinach. Taro is a perennial powerhouse that grows year after year without replanting, multiplying underground, expanding its clumps, producing more roots and more edible leaves every season. Anthropologist Dr. Patrick Kirch calls it one of the original survival crops that allowed Polynesians to colonize the Pacific. This was the food medieval Europeans wished they had during famines, but never planted. This is a forever plant. Taro has survival traits that modern vegetables can't match. It regrows for decades. Cut it down, it comes back. Move it, it reroots. Forget it, it still grows. Botanists estimate a single patch can survive 50 to 100 years if left undisturbed. It produces 2 foods at once. The leaves are protein-rich greens. The roots are dense, starchy, slow-release calories. During World War II, US nutrition researchers actually ranked taro higher than potatoes for survival gardens. It thrives in impossible conditions: flooded ground, dry soil, dense clay, tropical heat, temperate climates, partial shade. It grows where corn, wheat, and potatoes simply die. It's disease resistant. Compared to modern crops that fail from one pest, taro shrugs off most threats naturally due to its thick leaves and toxic raw sap. It multiplies on its own. Each root produces more roots. Each clump becomes many clumps. One single planting can turn into hundreds of pounds of food every year. No wonder ancient cultures treated taro as sacred. Taro should have become one of America's greatest crops. It grows in poor soil, it handles drought, it feeds families for decades, it outperforms potatoes in nutrition. So, why didn't it? The real answer begins in the early 1900s, when American agriculture shifted toward industrial, mechanized farming. Machines needed uniform crops, straight rows, fast harvest cycles, predictable yields, complete control. But taro refuses to follow rules. It spreads, it thickens, it multiplies naturally. You cannot force taro into a tidy, mechanized system. The USDA noted in a 1939 report that taro was too self-sustaining for commercial agriculture. In other words, it doesn't create dependency, no repeat seed purchases, no commercial fertilizers, no yearly replanting. For corporations, that made taro economically inconvenient. For families, it would have meant food security. But in a world driven by profit, not survival, taro quietly vanished from American soil, even as it remained sacred in Pacific cultures. Yet here's the irony: the very qualities that made taro unprofitable are the same qualities that made it priceless to ancient farmers. Because while modern agriculture chased high-yield annual crops, the old world paid attention to something far more important: what a plant does to the land itself. And that's where taro becomes shocking. Taro is not just a food crop, it is a soil restorer. Botanists at the Hawaii Agricultural Research Center discovered that taro's root system prevents erosion, rebuilds compacted soil, increases microbial activity, adds organic nutrients back into the earth. Its giant leaves shade the ground, locking moisture in. Its long roots open air channels through clay. Its falling leaves create a constant mulch layer. This is why taro patches in Indonesia, Samoa, Hawaii, and Fiji stayed fertile for centuries, long after other fields became barren. It is one of the rare crops that leaves the land richer, not poorer. Imagine if America had built its food system on crops that heal the soil, instead of draining it. Imagine farms where fertility increased every season, not decreased. How different our landscape, our food, our future would look today. But history didn't go that way, and the world would realize the cost of that decision when the unthinkable happened. World War II arrived. Food shortages hit nations across the globe. Governments scrambled to find crops that could feed soldiers and civilians. The US military studied dozens of plants from around the world. Taro ranked near the top in calories per acre, nutritional density, climate resilience, drought tolerance, storage potential. But it had one flaw. It wasn't the crop corporations wanted to promote. Potatoes, corn, and wheat had heavy industry behind them, political lobbies, seed companies, machinery, fertilizers, established billion-dollar systems. Taro threatened that system. By 1947, taro research programs were quietly shut down. The crop that had fed humanity since the dawn of civilization was pushed back into the shadows, but the Pacific never let it die. In Hawaii, Fiji, Samoa, Papua New Guinea, and across Polynesia, families kept planting it. Not because scientists told them to, but because their ancestors had trusted it for thousands of years. While the West turned to industrial agriculture, these cultures preserved one of the world's oldest survival systems. And here's the twist: the forgotten crop America pushed aside didn't become weaker. It became more relevant than ever. Here's the irony: the same crop ignored by industrial farming might be the easiest survival food you could ever grow. You don't need perfect soil, you don't need fertilizer, you don't even need a yard. Taro grows in pots, raised beds, shade, sun, clay, swampy areas, places where nothing else grows. Just plant a small piece of root, a corium. Water it once in a while, give it time, and it becomes a self-replicating food engine. In warm climates, it grows all year. In colder climates, it dies back in winter, then comes back in spring from its underground corms. A single planting can give you leaves for continuous harvesting, roots after 10 to 12 months. New plant offsets every year, a permanent source of calories and greens. This is why Pacific families traditionally planted taro near their homes. It guaranteed survival. Today, as food prices rise, as soil degrades, as climate becomes unpredictable, ancient wisdom is returning. Researchers at the University of Hawaii, the FAO, and even modern regenerative farmers are rediscovering what our ancestors always knew. Taro is one of the most resilient food crops ever created. It produces more calories than potatoes per square foot. It survives where corn and wheat cannot. It heals the soil instead of destroying it. It multiplies on its own. And it can feed a family for generations. This isn't just a plant. It is a blueprint, a reminder, a warning. Sometimes the crops we forget are the ones we need the most. Lost for 500 years. Ignored by the modern world, but still alive. Still growing. Still waiting. The ancient survival plant that feeds you forever. Taro.